Hi there, and welcome to a master's edition of Neil's Energy Policy News and Notes. I am Neil Chatterjee, Chief Government Affairs Officer at Palmetto, and boy, what a year this week was. And I'm only half joking. So much happened on both the domestic and foreign policy landscape. Couldn't possibly cover it all in this segment, but I will do my best to hit the highlights on what was really a significant week in energy and just all-out policy. The big focus, obviously, since Liberation Day has been on tariffs. What we saw was the administration unveiled their 1-2 punch of across the baseline tariffs paired with reciprocal tariffs that led to a market sell-off, some worrying signals in the bond market. And so earlier this week, President Trump pulled back and issued a 90-day pause on some of the reciprocal tariffs with other countries while escalating the trade war with China and really pushing the tariff threshold with China to historically high levels. The initial reverse did calm markets to some degree, and we saw some recovery. But there's still a lot of uncertainty here, uncertainty about how the standoff with China will play out. And now, the Treasury Secretary has, about 90 days to negotiate a number of these bilateral trade deals and tariff deals with other countries. There have been some positive signals out of the White House that they've been receiving calls from our allies around the world, and there may be some progress there. But I think until we have some clarity on what the final end game will be here, there will continue to be some agita amongst investors. And so it's just something that we need to closely watch. We here at Palmetto are doing a deep dive to fully understand the implications for our business. And I would advise everyone to do a similar detailed analysis. This is kind of unprecedented in modern history, this sort of approach to trade. Again, it shouldn't come as that much of a surprise. It's something that President Trump talked about on the campaign trail and has really been talking about since the 1980s. But I think the size and the scope and the aggressiveness of it did catch markets clearly off guard. And it's something that folks are dealing with. And it will be interesting to see how it plays out politically when it comes to other components of the president's agenda. We're starting to see some Republican free traders in the House and Senate, more traditional establishment Republicans, start to express publicly some misgivings about the approach to tariffs. And as senators and House members go home to their districts and states for a 2-week recess, it'll be interesting to see what they hear from their constituents and how that impacts their approach to all these policies, including the signature effort afoot right now to enact the president's domestic agenda through the budget reconciliation process. There were some significant developments on that front as well. The Senate over the weekend passed its budget resolution 52-48. I will note that Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, one of the most conservative hardliners when it comes to fiscal policy and spending, voted against it, as did Senator Susan Collins of Maine, one of the more moderate Republicans whose concerns about things like Medicaid cuts. And so that just shows you the difficulty in balancing this when you've got both the right and center right flanks of the party on opposite sides opposing the resolution. Similarly, the House, kudos to Speaker Johnson. For the third time, he overcame some really difficult odds and working with the president was able to muscle across the House budget resolution, identical to the Senate, 216 to 214. In negotiating with fiscal hardliners, he got their trust and confidence that he would be able to deliver on a minimum of $1.5 trillion in spending cuts. But this was the easy part. And now the hard part begins with these narrow margins in each chamber. The committees are going to get together now and start to actually put pen to paper and start drafting the legislative text of what these policies will look like. And we had a significant development that I sort of teased in last week's episode, where 4 U.S. senators signed a letter in defense of preserving the IRA clean energy tax incentives. This is significant because the magic number in the Senate is 3. And really, if Senator Paul is kind of a baked-in no, I'm sorry, the magic number is 4. And if Senator Paul is a baked-in no, that brings that magic number to 3. And it gives these senators, Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Senator John Curtis of Utah, and Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas, it gives them leverage in negotiating with the leadership, with the heads of the tax committees in trying to preserve these incentives. They're making the case that, if we want to really bring down energy costs, if we want to have a sufficient amount of supply to meet the coming surge in demand, then, really repealing these incentives doesn't make a whole lot of energy policy sense right now. And so we will continue to track that process and see where it goes. Along the lines of what we are doing to meet this coming surge in demand, earlier in the week, the president signed a number of executive orders designed to really prop up the coal industry, the domestic coal industry in the U.S. And he made the case that coal-fired power is going to be necessary to meet this coming surge in demand for AI, to meet that data center demand. I will note I'm from Kentucky. This issue of keeping coal plants open was something that was core to my tenure at the commission. I really wrestled with it on a controversial proposal from the Department of Energy to subsidize coal plants for having the attribute of on-site fuel. It'll be interesting to see how DOE and FERC address these executive orders. But I will note the challenge with meeting the surge in demand being driven by data centers is going to require new supply. Yes, we may have to revisit retiring existing generation if we need it to prevent any challenges to resource adequacy or reliability or, quite frankly, affordability. But we need new supply. And I keep coming back to the fact that, in my view, the quickest way to get new supply onto the grid is solar plus storage with gas peakers to balance the grid. This continues to be a really significant issue. Along those lines, my former colleagues at FERC just last night rejected rehearing on the Susquehanna filing. This is the data center co-location case that I had mentioned a couple of weeks ago. FERC continues to wrestle with how to find a path forward to address these complicated issues. There were other developments, executive orders touching on sunsetting regulations, as well as potentially overturning some regulations in the aftermath of the Loper-Bright case, which eroded Chevron deference for agencies. As I stated, so much happened, too much to cover on this episode. We'll certainly, as we get more clarity on these executive orders, we'll revisit them in a future episode of Neil's News and Policy Notes. Thank you again for joining me.